Hi, I'm Leah Louise from Inspired Quilting by Leah Louise, and I'm so excited that you're here today. I have a tutorial I think you're really going to enjoy. I want to share with you a technique that I use to make charm quilting so much simpler and easier. It's a quick way to make a quilt. It's a wonderful way to eliminate matching seams. If you're in a hurry, this is the quilt to go to. If you're a beginner, this is a great way to learn because you don't have to worry about nesting all those seams and corners. But either way, it's a wonderful quilt. And take a look behind me. There's actually a pair of quilts here. And they're in these fabulous tropical bright citrus colors that are so pretty. And they look great together. But do you see the difference between the two? One has the traditional Charm Square, almost like a checkerboard block, and the other one looks just a little bit different. Well, come on, let me show you what that difference is and how easy it is for you to make it and what a difference it's going to make in your next quilt. Oh, and don't forget, please subscribe to my channel. You probably recognize this quilt that we made recently. This is a baby quilt that we made out of 2 charm packs. It's very fast and easy to make. It's a simple basic block pattern, but there's an even simpler, faster way to make it. And that's what I want to show you here today. Now, I originally started with 12 fat quarters and I cut them all into charms, and that gave me the equivalent of about 4 charm packs. So I used 2 on here. This is 8 blocks by 10, and I'm going to do the same with this. Now, these were the extra charms that I had, and what I'm going to do is show you how to alter this pattern just a little bit to eliminate all these matching seams, because if we have to match these seams as we're going along, that's going to take a lot more time than if we can just sew straight across. So what we are going to do is take 8 of our charm squares and cut them down to a 3 by 5 square, and that 2-inch piece that you cut off can be set aside for another project. Now, if you use fat quarters like I did, you don't really have to use your charms because there are going to be scraps from your fat quarters after cutting out your charms, and you can use that fabric instead, and that won't affect then the count of charms that you have to work with. So what we're going to do is take these smaller pieces, and every other row we're going to set in this half-size charm square. And by doing that, everything is going to move over. This seam is going to now fall in the center here, so we don't have to match this anymore. We don't have to worry about lining those seams up to get perfect corners. You are going to love how simple and easy this is. This is going to make a very fast quilt, and it's perfect for beginners who aren't used to matching up the seams yet, and they're just learning the 1/4-inch seam. This is a great teaching quilt, a great learning quilt. But if you need a quilt in a hurry for a quick gift, this is also going to work perfectly for you because you can get this done very quickly. So let me get the chain piecing started, and I'll show you what it's going to look like when we get our first rows together. Take a look at how these rows are offset with the half-size charms. So we start with our top row, and we're going to piece 2 like this. Then the second row, we're going to have a half charm with a full charm. Then the next row, 2 full charms, and we're going to alternate all the way down. This has a half charm. And by doing that, this is going to allow these rows to offset. But what I do want to show you is each row on the whole charm row will have 8 blocks. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 right here. And that's a full one. Let me kind of scrunch this up in the middle so you can see both ends. Now this one will have a total of 9. It'll have 7 full charms and 2 halves. These 2 halves make up that 8th one. We've got 7 in the middle with 1 on each end, and then another one here with a full 8. So what I want to show you is what you're going to do when it's time to sew your rows is just to cut the chain piecing. the chain stitching, you won't be able to keep that in place. Now I just do one row at a time so I don't get it mixed up. And you'll see that everything has been pressed in one direction from one side all the way to the other on both rows. I'm actually going to start sewing on this row, and I'm going to show you why. So let me cut a couple of these apart. Oh, a little squeaky on the scissors. So we've got a half square and a full square, and they're going to go side by side. Now, this actually only needed to be 2 3/4 inches, but we cut it at the 3 inches just to give us that little bit of fudge factor. And what you'll do is offset this by about 1/4 of an inch. So when you put your full square on top of the cut half square, you're only going to, give yourself 1/4 of an inch there. And then that will put this seam pretty much in the center of the block. You're going to start, it depends on which way you press your seams, whether you all go this way or this way. But you want to start on the side where you're going to sew with all the seams going away from your presser foot. That way they're not going to get turned and flipped over as you're sewing. They're going to lay nice and straight. And you don't have to worry about the ones on the bottom because everything is going in the same direction. So you're going to sew one row this way, and then what you're going to do is sew the next row, which is right here. And then you're going to sew that the same way. You're going to give it just that 1/4 of an inch and then sew the seam across. Let me show you an example. So you can see right here that the half block is just a little bit longer. It extends beyond the 5 inch because this, like I said, is 3 inches. It really only needed to be 2 3/4, but that gives us a little fudge factor with seam allowance. If your seam allowance isn't exactly 1/4 inch, this gives you a little bit of space to work with. Then once these are sewn, see how what we do on one end we do on the other. So this has the 1/4 inch offset as well on every other row, as does this one. And all the rows are pressed in one direction. Then after these rows are sewn together, I came back and I pressed everything down. All the rows are going to go in the same direction. So this is very easy to finish as far as the sewing aspect because you don't have seams to match. All the seams you do have go in the same direction. You press it all in one direction when you're finished. And look at how this is. Oh my goodness. The offset pattern, let me show you this compared to the last quilt that we made. The exact same fabrics. Well, this is the more, I don't want to say complex, but it's more difficult to put together. It's more timely to put together because you're busy lining up seams. This, you don't have to worry about lining up, but I think this offset pattern really makes a lot of interest out of all these. I think it's more interesting to look at because the blocks are offset. Your patterns just sort of mix and match across the quilt, whereas this, it's very angular, it's very very square and checkerboard like. Even though you're not going light and dark, you can definitely see these blocks just really stand out. And here it all just sort of works a little more smooth. I like these offset patterns, and you can do this with just about any kind of a patchwork block quilt, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and we'll explore some of those. But I wanted to show you this one because this is such a quick and fast quilt to finish. If you have some quilting gifts you want to make, if you have a ton of fabric and you don't want to spend a lot of money on gifts, then make some of these lap quilts. These are two charm packs, and they measure 8, which is about 40 inches, by 10, which is about 42 or 3 inches. So you add a third charm pack to that, and you're going to have a nice lap quilt. Or you have 2 charm packs and 2 charm packs, and you get a pair of baby quilts. So there are some good options here for you to work with as far as gift giving and also just making a very easy pattern. So go ahead and give this a try. I'd like to know what you think about the difference between these two, between the offset and the standard aligned blocks that we're all so used to in doing patchwork. This is great. Like I said, two benefits: offset patterns, no seams to align, and then you get this great little additional pattern in your design of your blocks that you don't otherwise get. So let me get these finished and quilted. I can't wait to show you what they look like. You probably recognize this from the last video. It's now all complete. It's finished with a nice green backing that sort of falls in line with these citrusy colors and a bright sort of lime chartreusey green border, or excuse me, binding. And I think it all looks great. But what I want to show you is how the other quilt turned out. Look at how pretty this quilt turned out. And do you notice the difference in these rows? We have our straight charm squares all set in nice even blocks all across the row, whereas this, we have some offset rows. And that creates a little bit more of a pattern, kind of a fun design where things are a bit offset and not completely lined up. And I really like the look of this. I think it came out very, very nice. And it's a lot of fun with some great colors. And the backing on this one is a light yellow gingham, and I used a sort of a pinky, peachy color on the binding for this. But I love how this quilt turned out. It really is beautiful. And the beauty of this, too, is that you can make it any size. It's just charm squares. And you just add more in order to get the size that you need. There is a download down below in the description where you can get a free chart of how many charm squares you need per quilt. So if you want to make a lap size quilt with 4 or 5 charm packs, you get an idea of what sizes you have to work with. And so that can be handy. And plus the patterns for these will be on the website tomorrow. I just don't have that ready today to put on the video, but I do want to show this to you. I'm excited about these quilts, and I hope you are too. This is a fun way to do your charm squares, to give them just a little bit different look, and it's attractive and it's eye-catching. And while the traditional is really nice and it's a lot of fun, there's just something about these offsets. You know how I am about asymmetrical. I love things that don't always line up as perfectly as expected. So here we are. We have 2 beautiful quilts ready to go to some sweet little babies who are going to live happily ever after because they got a quilt. How awesome is that? Quilts just make everybody happy. So go ahead and get your quilt started. I can't wait to see what you make. Be sure and send me pictures. Thank you so much for being with me today.